If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines. Available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world on TV, radio and online. I bid you all good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in all the world's time zones. This is The More Show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Dr. Paula Lake, who is a registered psychiatrist and a coach with over 17 years' experience in the mental health field. Her background includes working with accident victims, psychiatric clients, individuals with adjustment issues, and survivors of sexual abuse. Dr. Lake will join us to discuss strategies to build reliance, overcome life challenges, achieve personal success, and a positive emotional state. She has interviewed a variety of guests in areas such as fitness goals, relationships and communication, sexual addictions, management, and depression, and much more. Dr. Paula Lake, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's wonderful.
It's great to have you on. And just tell the audience just a little bit about yourself to begin with.
I'm a registered psychologist. I work in private practice here in Nanaimo. This is in Canada, British Columbia, beautiful British Columbia. I've been in private practice for probably about the last 9 years, but I've been in the profession of psychology for about 17 years. So that is really my passion, is working with people, with groups. Yeah, that's a big part of what I do. I also hosted a show for 5 years, a radio show. And on the show, I interviewed all types of people that had something to say about resilience, something to say about dealing with adversity. And that's one of my passions, because adversity is to some degree inevitable. And the question I always have is, how do we navigate adversity? And so a big part of my life has been guided by that one question.
Okay. Now, would you say that you're an intuitive psychologist?
I as a psychologist, I am very intuitive. I actually believe that probably we all are. Intuition, I believe, we can become more attuned and improve our ability to connect to intuition. And just one comment on intuition. One of the things we've found is that there's brain matter, brain nerves around the heart and around the gut. And they're actually wondering if what we're knowing is that there's information within us that we may not be necessarily able to articulate or to consciously recognize. And that's what we're understanding about intuition on that level, on that physical level. So
kind of like a conscious body, in a sense, conscious cells.
A conscious self. And I believe that a lot of us are, as we mature, we disconnect from that ability. We disconnect from our intuitive abilities. And I do think it's an important piece. As we get better and we get well in life, we actually learn how to listen to our own intuition.
Wow.
Yes.
I wonder what a conscious body sometimes would think of the way that we treat our bodies in general.
That, I don't know that we take enough time to think about that, which is why I do what I do. And I've come to, I've been doing this for long enough now that I think the value of it and recognizing that this is something that I think everybody needs to do. And unfortunately, right now, we allocate it to a psychologist, therapist, and all these specialists. But I actually think probably we need to all be developing these abilities within ourselves, probably from a young age.
Well, I mean, were you always, quite as intuitive as you are now, or did you come from a quite restricted background? I mean, what was upbringing like?
Well, I don't know that I did. The word sensitivity is a word that I think about, because I would say sensitive people probably are more intuitive. In the sense that they are attuned to what's happening around them, and they have perhaps they receive the information from others more on those nuanced levels that others might be more oblivious to. As for myself, I'd say I probably had sensitivities that I later became able to interpret in a way that facilitated my practice and my working with people. But it's not until you really start to recognize what is all this information that I'm receiving from my environment. Because I think when we're young, we don't always know what to do with all that information. And sometimes if we don't get that kind of guidance, it can actually sometimes work against us. And so knowing how to recognize what the messages are that we're intuiting, I think is an important part of learning to use it for the best.
Yeah. And is that what you would connect with your clients with, as in coming from that kind of space, in a sense?
Beyond a doubt, it's very much a process, and when I'm actually working with my clients, I find my center. If I'm not in my center, I can disconnect from intuitiveness, and I think it's important when we want to connect to intuitiveness for ourselves to practice really being grounded and breathing and being able to filter through noise, because we can get really absorbed by all the chaos around us, if not, and we can shut off our own intuitive ability. So a big part of what I do in helping nurture that is staying as centered as I can and trusting information that is coming from inside, right? And sometimes you don't even know where it's coming from, right? But there's something that sort of comes to the surface, and it just feels right, and very often it is. Yeah.
Do you find much resistance from your peers with the way you approach these types of subjects?
This is the thing I have to say, because I started off when I was young, I got involved in hypnosis and some of these alternative approaches. I went the scientific route because I had that skepticism in me. And I've really come full circle. So I'm finding myself now going back to my roots when I was young, which is more intuitive, more spiritual, and more open. But what I'm really, really appreciating right now is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with authors like Dr. Bruce Lipton. He wrote Biology of Belief. He's a cell biologist. And what I really love is that now we're starting to see science, spirituality, energy, psychology kind of coming together. And yeah, I am a little bit set apart from my peers. But what's great is the ability to meld all these different philosophies together, because as much as they might have a different messenger, the message is not all that different. And that seems to allow me to walk that line. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It does. And I mean, the role of the sort of subconscious mind, it plays an important part, doesn't it, into our health and well-being?
The subconscious I know we use that word, and that word is brought out in culture. I don't know that we truly understand or people really grasp what that means. I'd say, and some of the neuroscientists right now, they're saying that about 95% of what we do is subconsciously driven, and 5% is what we do within consciousness. So it is absolutely important because it actually guides the decisions we're making in our lives, the people we're choosing, what we choose to settle with. And so the subconscious is that, is I guess you can say it's a form of those unconscious pieces of information. And through the years between 2 and 12 is those formative years. That's when we absorb, all those messages out there. Our brain waves are in alpha theta state during those time periods. And the subconscious also isn't just belief systems, but it is also those automatic associations we develop with. It could be what we come to understand as being safe or unsafe. And so absolutely, I think that if we don't take the time to really think about what is driving us, then we will be driven by it. So either we become aware and we start to channel our decisions, or we just let our subconscious kind of dictate for us where we go in life.
Yeah. I mean, do you think challenging some of those decisions comes from, to begin with, to make sure we're doing what we're passionate about and what we love? Because without that, it becomes a bit more of a job, doesn't it, rather than, doing it from a different space?
You mean in terms of...
Well,
Could you explain the question?
If we're doing a job that's,
yes.
We're not really that passionate about, but when we
yes.
come from passion, and then love is obviously a key element of that,
yes.
we're living in a different environment then for the reason for being as well.
Yes. I absolutely believe passion is the key, passion and purpose. I also think that we live in a cultural hypnosis. Because I'm very passionate about hypnosis as an approach, I look at our conscious waking hypnosis. And the conscious waking hypnosis we have in our culture does not dictate find a job in which you're passionate. They will often dictate, find a job, make money, and get a family, right? So
right.
We are so, those are all those embedded, subconscious, out there messages that we absorb around us. And I think we do it without awareness that we do it. So the importance of finding something of passion for me is the ultimate. But the trick is, first, breaking that hypnosis for people and helping them understand that they can break those outside ideas we have that tell us, forget about passion, just get a job, just focus on security. And those are those subconscious messages we get that really limit us in being the people that we potentially could be.
Yeah, and I guess as well, to look at life differently, because you get clients from all sorts of, different specialities, in a sense, I'll call them that you help.
Yes,
and,
all types.
People have got to, if change is going to happen with them, do you think they've got to look outside the box of their normal thinking, outside the normal paradigm of what they would call their truth?
Yes, yeah. Think out of the box. Beyond a doubt. And I think what I usually look for is what someone's level of readiness, because to think outside of the box can be very threatening for some people. And thinking in the box might have been their safety zone. And when I'm working with people, I'm looking for that door or that opening for them to be able to challenge their thinking. And there are ways that I approach it to facilitate that. But absolutely, it's really important. The idea of stepping out of the box means challenging beliefs that have gotten them to where they are at that point in their lives. And sometimes people resist that. Sometimes a belief that they've held for a very long time, it's uncomfortable to be open to changing that. And once they start to understand the reason and value that thinking out of a box is helpful, eventually they can open themselves up to that. It is essential to change, because if we're going to change internally, something in us has to change. So that might be the way we're viewing things, our thinking. It's integral. We cannot change if we do not step out of the box we've become comfortable with.
Now, one of the questions I really wanted to ask you, leading on from what you were just saying, our truths, in a sense, do affect some of the subjects that you deal with, and we'll get into those as well. But some people may say that I don't want to. This is my truth. I don't want to think outside that box because it's still leading me to know more of an understanding than what I had before, in a sense. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That they're not, they don't perceive themselves as gaining anything more from thinking outside of the box.
That's right.
Is that right? I think what I had alluded to or mentioned before was that I think we are we have a tendency to confirm what we already believe, and I think our brain is actually set up so that it wants to seek confirmation for a belief we have. This is why there's so much, when we get on what is truth, it becomes an uncertain thing, because we're so attached to what truth is. I used a metaphor before regarding developing new beliefs, and I do believe that people are uncomfortable changing beliefs. And I will acknowledge that, when you start to experiment with thinking out of the box, I don't expect people to feel comfortable right away. They're thinking out of a box, and people have an inherent need, and this is one thing I see very commonly with people, in wanting immediate results. And, when they try something out, if it doesn't give them that immediate fulfillment or thing that they're seeking, then they go back into their comfort zone. And that's one pattern I see people. We're really creatures of habit, and we're comfortable with what we know. We're comfortable with the world we've come to understand and the way we understand it. So I really validate that discomfort for people. And it's not about someone pushing you to think out of the box. It's an exploration for people to take those journeys and think outside of the box and kind of walk with them and help them see what some of those barriers are to stepping out, right? What it is that blocks them from thinking different from what they are comfortable with. I think when people come to understand that the way you have been thinking on a habitual subconscious level is not bringing you results, or is not bringing what you're looking for, when they understand that what's brought them to that point is why they may be having some problems. It's about helping nudge them so that there's a willingness to explore alternatives. That's really the only place to go. I love Einstein's phrase, definition of insanity, is you keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And it is, to some extent, helping people understand that resistance and what it is. I validate it because I understand the discomfort around it. But I also believe that's why we tend to stay in this box and stay the same. People resist change. It's inherent.
Well, I mean, as a psychologist, you have as well worked with past life research. What have you found to be some of the links with some of the issues and patterns that we have, or the people that to come see yourself, connected with past lives?
I think you might be referring to past life regression. Is
Yes.
that some of the work you're referring to? I've done a little bit of that work. I think the through line is not really all that different. You know, when I grab at subconscious material from people, they may identify it as coming from a previous experience. You know, it doesn't necessarily change the process of what I'm doing when I'm working with them. What we're doing is we're unraveling and trying to understand that inner universe within them. And through that, it may touch back on a past life experience. It may touch them on an experience they had when they were 2 years of age and barely can remember. And I think what it is that's rich material for me to understand what's happening within a person and perhaps some of the challenges that they may be going through. So sometimes when they go into a past life, it's the way that they're making sense of that experience and how it's impacting them in the present today that really matters. I don't know why that.
That's okay. That's okay.
Apologize.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
That was on non-disturb. There we go. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's for me the subconscious domain. It's I put that on do not disturb, so I really apologize about that. I don't know what happened here.
It's okay.
Okay, there we go. It's for me, what I find fascinating, it's the universe we experience internally, which for me is much grander than the universe we experience outside of us. The universe inside us is expansive. It can go in all directions in the future, when we envision future, when we go to the past. The boundaries of it are a lot less enclosed than when we talk about what we see as concrete, as reality. For me, I find that is much richer universe. And when people have stories, whether it's their past life, whether it's their present life, or whether it's even a vision of a future life, what I'm interested in is what that story says about them as people and where they may be in their current present challenge and where that's going to take them. And that's where I find the richness in that material, is whether it's past, present, future.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And like you say, you know, the answers seem to lie within when you look at it from a different perspective, and especially on a soul level as well. And, you know, some of the guests that you've interviewed on your radio show, you know, they must have changed your way of looking at things as well.
They absolutely. I think it's the beauty of being stretched in expanding the way that you think. You know, what I find fascinating, because I've certainly interviewed people that do channeling, I've interviewed people that have gone through regressive experiences or very alternative experiences. But what I really love when I interview and get a chance to meet all these unique thinkers and people that approach things in different ways, is there is a common thread. And so the common thread that I see, whether someone is channeling, whether someone has had an extraterrestrial experience, is it comes down to still this base of finding self, of the messages are common. And that's one thing I find fascinating, because the messages always tend to gear towards thoughts about love, connection to spirit, something bigger than us. But all those that emotional dimension that actually fits really well with psychology. So it's not countering what we're doing in psychology. It's complementing it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why for me, I'm not worried about who the messenger is. You know, I like the message, and the message works. It's an empowering message for whether it's a channeler, a meditator, a spiritual oriented person. And that's the beauty. And honestly, what I'm really excited about now is that we're even having even more scientific realms coming together with these alternate perspectives. And we're starting to put those together. And for me, this is a really exciting time to be in my profession, because I do think we are starting to step out of the box a little bit as far as a profession goes. I'm not sure you're aware of where we're moving towards energy psychology right now.
Wow, that's interesting.
Energy psychology incorporates emotional freedom technique, where, you know, right now we're in North America, and it might be the same where you are. All these Eastern approaches are being integrated into our North American model of health, and, you know, mindfulness practice and yoga and acupuncture. And I think it's because we're starting to say what we know isn't sufficient. It's not the materialistic realm, which we're always looking for sort of concrete visual proof of what we believe. It doesn't answer all the questions. And we're starting to recognize that there's these other dimensions that maybe we just can't capture. And that's why I'm really excited to be in this profession at this time, because I feel there's a bridging and there's a recognition of sort of the limiting approach we have when we're always just looking for concrete material evidence for everything that we experience.
That's right.
Yeah.
So when a patient comes to see you, for example, obviously do they know they're going to see an intuitive psychologist?
Well, I don't know that, but, you know, I suspect that when they look at the website, they got to know it at some level. I'm not really too sure. I have a fairly really busy practice. I suspect I come from the place that they perhaps intuit that I'm the right person for them to go to. I think there's a draw. I believe there's an attraction, and that people who are pulled to want to go in that dimension, I think it speaks to them. I think when they come and they sit here, it speaks to them because they want that something. They want more than just a rational, empirical approach to healing, which I don't think is sufficient.
Right. Okay. Well, look, we're just going to take a quick break now, and we'll be right back after this. So stay tuned and don't go anywhere.
The Moore Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the Moore Show website.
The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Welcome back to the show. I'm still joined by my guest psychologist, Dr. Paula Lake. Dr. Paula Lake, welcome back.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you on. You know, this is where it gets into the even more interesting stuff for myself, because just take me through when a patient comes to see you. What is the sort of standard way of diagnosing a particular patient, for example?
Well, I mean, in our professions, typically we're given a whole battery of questions. But really, what we're trying to understand are what are all what's the background to this person's struggle at the current time? What is it in their personal experience that may have fed into what we're seeing? And so ultimately, what we end up wanting to know is, what was it like for them as they grew up, and how did they see themselves? So I like to check into trauma is a very important one for me because I do a lot of work with trauma. And trauma is one of the ways we reach the subconscious mind. There's three ways. I don't think this is mutually exclusive. One of them is through trauma. Another way is when we're in a very deeply relaxed state. The third one is repetition. And so when I'm meeting with someone, I'm trying to understand what their belief structure is, and they might not even be aware of it. They might only be aware of the choices they've made in life, of their problem, but they might not be aware of the driving beliefs. And so I'm always listening when I meet someone for what's behind this behavior, and it may have come from trauma, may have come from their family. It may. I look for the sources of it in a number of different dimensions, depending on what their problem is.
Right. Okay. And again, just to sort of touch on a little bit of all ground here as well. The role of beliefs in well-being, does that have an impact as well?
I would probably say it's central. I'd say it's the hub of the wheel. I'm not mutually exclusive. I'm a very holistic practitioner. Okay? So I don't allocate domain to solely beliefs as the core. I do see it, though, as a central element within us, that if we don't examine them. So an example may be I may have a lot of faulty beliefs about my worth, my trust, what I can achieve, who I can be. That doesn't mean I'm consciously aware of that. Very often when I'm doing an assessment with people, I will look at the different areas of their lives. How are you doing at work? What's your career like? What are your relationships like? And what you'll start to see is that in every domain that a person finds himself struggling, there's some element of a belief issue there. There's often a tied to self-esteem. And so the areas of their lives are great ways for me to get an idea of how they feel about themselves as people, what they think is possible, because I think beliefs are inherently self-fulfilling. We're brilliant at finding evidence for our belief. I think it's something that we do very well.
Yeah.
And we're wanting to change that. Of course, they're going to have a negative belief if they're having difficult relationships. They're going to have negative thoughts about that. But little do they realize that that's actually probably what's keeping them stuck in that same issue.
Right. And all these beliefs, in a sense, can be transformed. I mean, they can all be changed, can't they?
I absolutely believe that beliefs can be changed. The first time I hypnotized someone, I was 13 years old. And I remember I had watched it on a program. I was actually quite shocked. This person went into a complete hypnotic state that I wasn't expecting. I'm a 13-year-old girl, right? I started self-hypnosis when I was 19. And when I worked with that, I did it. I was a very committed person. I did it for about a year. But what I've come over the course of all these years to realize is that changing beliefs is beyond a doubt. It is possible, but it's cultivating the beliefs through pathways that will allow those beliefs to reach the subconscious mind. If I just have a thought, an intellectual thought, that doesn't mean it's a belief. And many people who are trying to change the way they think, sometimes they struggle with it because it doesn't feel real to them. And that is the most important piece for me. A belief is not a belief if it's only in the head. It needs to move down. and so the work that I do is I talk about how to cultivate a system where you can integrate and have that belief really be true in here. It needs to hold truth. Otherwise, it's tenuous. It's a tenuous belief. You know, I believe I'm good until something bad happens to me, right?
Yeah, right.
That's not really a belief.
Well,
Okay.
actually, what I wanted just to say quickly is, you know, beliefs are like energy, aren't they, in a sense? It is an energy that
Yes.
it's a manifestation energy in a sense. So if you do truly think you are at this level, you are worth this, or whatever the belief may be, then you're putting that energy out there, and you know you're attracting it, aren't you?
There's no doubt, absolutely no doubt in my mind. And one thing, I love the concept of energy, and I think it's, for me, for listeners who may be interested in understanding energy, even on a quantum physics level, on a cell biology level, I do encourage people to look up Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's done a lot of work now and sort of bridging even spirituality with understanding, you know, the makeup of our cells. But beliefs are, I kind of lost your question. Tell me that again.
No, it's fine. No, yeah, I was just saying about the manifestation of thoughts, in a sense, that what you think you are, that's,
absolutely,
you know, you put it into reality, in a sense.
If you want to understand that on a quantum physics level, I do encourage people to go and read and understand a little bit more about quantum physics. I mean, what we know now is the quantum particle at the very, the most base level is energy. And if you understand and, you know, research and understand a little bit about what we are made of, at the very foundation of us, we are energy. And when we understand that, and I often will talk about the energy of a belief. You know, one of the things I find fascinating is that depressed individuals, there's not one I've ever met that doesn't talk about being tired, having physical fatigue. When I work with a belief, I will look at the energy of a belief, because a belief has energy. I'm not good enough. I'm unworthy. I can't get what I want in life. That has a lot different energy than I'm a great person. I'm vibrant. I can achieve. And those energy systems, we communicate them beyond our level of awareness. You know, I understood that even around our heart, they've actually found some instruments where a radius of energy can be detected with some special instruments right now around our heart, right? So we are energy beings. I think when we come to understand that, and understand that just because we're not communicating something verbally does not mean that it is not being communicated, that there's an essence that is being received. In terms of the law of attraction, which I'm assuming that some of your listeners, viewers may be aware of, there is an understanding that there's a complementary energy that we draw to us, and that energy goes out into the energy field, and that is an element of who we tend to attract to us. You know, it's not an accident. You might keep meeting an alcoholic or someone who's abusive, or, you know, there's these unspoken knowings, I believe, that we attract and draw to us.
So, I mean, do you get patients that come to you that say they want to change, that say, you know, they want help, but really they, at a deeper level, they don't?
Absolutely. beyond a doubt. And if I do get someone like that, I will actually talk about that. I mean, I think it's important to honor that if somebody isn't really ready, nothing is worse than feeling that you're being somehow pushed into something, a domain you don't feel ready with. And one of the things when I'm doing this work, and let's say we're working on clearing out energy, because I think we carry sometimes our past in our body, right? We carry this energy around us. And when we're in the process of doing some real clearing and clearing of that energy that you've carried, clearing of what I call limiting beliefs, which is what I tend to work with and change. That's a journey, and it's a great journey, and it's a worthy journey. But you need to be ready to walk on that journey, and so I do honor. In my earlier years, where I was this zealous therapist, you want to kind of convince someone that it's worth it. But I believe there's a nice saying, and it's when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I do like to, my concept when I'm working with people who may not be ready is to plant seeds. And I always think if we plant seeds just to perhaps keep that door open for them, so that when a time is ready and they've had a positive experience and had their experience respected, they're more likely to go down that path at another time that they're ready to do it.
Okay. Now, let's talk about some of the subjects that you deal with as well. I mean, let's go straight to smoking in a sense. What are the reasons behind, general reasons behind people smoking, would you say?
There's a number of reasons. I don't know that I could actually tie it just to one. I think, are you talking about while they're in the addiction, or why they pick up it in the first place?
Yeah, why they're in the addiction, and why they don't want to stop, knowing that it's harming themselves in a sense.
There's a number of things when we talk about even thing like addiction, and I will go to a brain analogy to it. It has some brain mechanisms and it has some coping mechanisms there. We are a society, we want to feel good. I think we're all driven to seek pleasure, and if we struggle to deal with certain feelings that we have internally, if we have discomfort, that is when we're more inclined to turn to addictive substance. And it becomes a form of coping with emotions and feelings. What we understand about the brain is that there's an area of the brain that's the emotion center of the brain. The emotion center of the brain is what we call the lizard brain. And the lizard brain is very primitive. That's that part of us that says, I want to feel good right now, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to feel good right now. And then we have this frontal part of our brain. It's a frontal lobe, and that is the one that says, maybe it's not such a good idea. Okay, so what I see with any people that have struggles with different forms of addiction is that they're driven by the need for immediate satisfaction. Now, I'm not talking about the chemical aspect of addiction to cigarettes or smoking. Okay, that is a recognized fact. We have receptor cells for nicotine, and it absorbs, and our body starts to tell us that we need it. But I'm talking about the emotional realm of any addiction. Usually the birth of it is to feel good, to get distracted. But my experience is that anyone who has not dealt with, let's say, some trauma, some grief, and we're going to go back to energy because we are energy beings, and where there's a lot of, let's say, closure of these unresolved things within us and that we haven't dealt with, addictions become a way to cope, a way to escape, and a way to not deal with those internal experiences.
Okay. Well, we're just going to take a very quick break here, so stay tuned and we'll be right back.
The Moore Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The Moore Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Welcome back to the show. I'm still joined by my guest, Dr. Paula Lake. Now, Paula, we were just talking about addiction there. Really, interesting stuff. How what you say is it's based on an emotional level as well that we've not dealt with. So, some grief or whatever level that may be at an emotional level. Okay, so how would we heal that, in a sense? How do we heal that emotion? Would it be to be honest with ourselves that and try to go down to the root core of what may be causing our problem?
Yeah, one of the things that I have truly been reflecting on is our culture as a society, and I feel we're not equipping individuals to know how to sit with self, to be with self, and to know how to deal with pain or grief or sadness. What we've tended to do in our society is focus solely on achieving and success and family and all of these things. So I don't think we're an inherently healthy society in that respect. And so for someone, when I look at any kind of trauma or grief issue, and if we're going to talk about energy, that becomes, I also work with police officers as an example, and police officers may have an inclination towards, let's say, drinking as a way to cope with their emotions. But what it draws are people's beliefs that it's the attitude of just suck it up and put things behind you and be strong and ignore it and move forward. What happens is addictions becomes an easy way for them to learn to put it behind them, right? To have it as a strategy. So the task really becomes, how can we eliminate the need for the addiction and increase that person's ability to deal with feelings that are uncomfortable, that create distress, because many people want to run from those feelings. We don't want to feel them, and perhaps we're not given the tools to know that feeling them is just a part of it. It's not the end result. It's being able to walk through it to the other side. And that is the trick when anyone is trying to give up an addiction, is saying, well, this doesn't feel so good. I'm giving up something that's actually helping me feel better, and then you're telling me now I got to sit here with these feelings. That's not the end goal. The end goal is to actually help them deal with the unresolved issues so that they can, they don't feel that need for the substance, that they know when an issue surfaces that they have the ability and the tools to deal and contain and to work past it. And that is when, a freedom from addiction is much more feasible.
Now, obviously, we've, been discussing addictions there, and really interesting stuff. The way to sort of help yourself to overcome those issues as well. But then we have other issues that I'm sure you've dealt with, which is sort of end of life issues and grief and bereavement. And how do you deal with some of the clients that are coming to an end of life process, for example, or have lost someone?
I probably have to say when it's touching a particular domain like grief. When it comes to, let's say, depression or anxiety, I have a handle on what kind of thinking underlies depression and anxiety. When it comes to grief, I always think we're talking about this very primal essence of who we are as human beings. I mean, animals can grieve. So I see grief as this natural process that we go through in releasing someone that we were very attached to. I actually, when I think about grief, it's not even only about death. I think about grief even about loss or change of life or loss of a dream. And so we can have grief on many different levels. And when I'm working with grief, there's a point where it's allowing somebody to really take that time to mourn the loss. Now, one of the things that I do when I'm working with people in grief and dealing with the adjustment, the loss of change of their lives, what they'd hoped for, helping people get to a point in their lives where they can honor what it is they had and feel at peace with moving forward. And the way to do that, there can be a number of ways. I mean, sometimes, because I use hypnosis is a beautiful, it's not in the way that people always think about it. People think of stage hypnosis. Hypnosis, for me, is entering into that inner domain. And there are times when I've dealt with grief that in a trance state, when they're sort of exploring whatever feelings they have, they might even be visited by their loved one. And they may find closure with the loved one through some dialogue or conversation. And for me, that touches on the spiritual realm. And I stay within the realm that my clients might be comfortable going. Some are less comfortable with that. But for when there's that opening, I think it's beautiful because you can process grief on that level. And I think it can bring a lot of healing for people when they do that.
Yeah, and like you say, only if they're ready to go in the direction that you could take them. Would you do that as well? Yeah, and you'd know the signs. So, in some of the work you do as well, I believe that you obviously work with relationships. I mean, is relationships the most sort of common issue, would you say, or one of the most?
Probably at the core. At the core is relationships, because whether the problem is at work or even, personally, it always seems to connect to a relational issue. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it goes, like you say, from work to couples, and and that's, it's like I once spoke to someone about that was doing the psychic lines, and they said the one issue that people always call up for is is he the right one? Am I going to meet the right person out there? And you've got to be happy with your own space as well, haven't you?
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I'm actually recently been looking into how people experience being alone, and with profound loneliness that for me, I understand it and I have great compassion for it. Partly it's fed by our culture. I don't think we live in community.
we're disengaged from one another, where focus is on pursuits and acquisitions. And I do think that creates a problem. And I think the more we have a stigma, because there are stigmas around people who are alone, and I meet people who are may have had a deceased husband or a family member that's been murdered, but what worsens their grief in dealing with those things is this idea or stigma or fear of being alone. And I do see that as a vulnerable point, because if we absorb all this cultural hypnosis around what it means to be on your own, we're more vulnerable. And what I see is that's when people attract the wrong people into their lives, is when they're not comfortable within themselves, and there's low self-esteem, there's a negative self-perception about what it means for them to live life on their own. They're more vulnerable to grabbing onto unhealthy relationships.
Yeah. And I suppose one element of all that we've spoken about as well, it has to be fear as well. I mean, fear plays a part, doesn't it?
Fear is huge, and I do a lot of work with fear. And I know that one of my orientations is very much whether we're focused on fear or whether we're focused on our vision. And I do see fear, again, on an energetic level. Okay? It tends to sometimes attract that which we're actually fearful of. And, when I work with people in terms of training their thinking, is to allow them to create a confidence and a visual image of where they want to go in their life. We can become accustomed to focusing on what we don't want and what we're scared of, and what happens is, we were talking before about manifestation.
Yeah.
Well, when we focus on fears and our mind is delving into them, there's a greater likelihood that we're going to manifest the very source of our fear. And I think it's important for people to understand the role that fear can play in their lives, and to develop ways to diminish fear, to lessen it, to improve their inner trust in self and spirit and God and whatever that might be that they're driven by. That allows them to then create more of what they want.
Yeah, and I suppose, to imagine and reassess and use your imagination to guide you to where you might want to go, to imagine that better life, to imagine that grander version of yourself as well.
I believe strongly in using visual, and in my practice and work, I believe that when we go into a visual or let's say imagery, because some people are less visual than others, the more we can sense an experience internally, feel it, taste it, imagine it, experience it, the more likely we are to move towards it. And the more disconnected we are from it, the less likely. And for me, any kind of change I'm really trying to help people with, it's like I want to create an imprint. I want it to be an internal experience for them that feels visceral. And when we can get to that and embrace more life-giving beliefs and thoughts and even images about where we're going to go in our lives, we're more inclined to move towards it. And also, because I've worked a lot with even the concept of mindfulness and meditation, there is something about fear that takes us away from the present moment, And most people that have anxiety, what I see is fear, anxiety is fear, is that they cannot be present. And for us to manifest, it requires an ability to be present.
Yeah.
To be present where we are. And that's what is really beautiful about when fear starts to drop. They're more engaged. People are more present in their life. They're more present with their partners, with children, with their job. Their mind isn't everywhere but.
No.
And the chances of manifesting when we have that ability to bring ourselves present are higher. We're receiving information. We're responding as our best selves at that point. And
yeah.
From that, we're more likely to manifest.
Yeah, you're so right there. Being in the moment, your better part comes through, your better self comes through in a sense, and and how you deal with situations and remaining in the moment as well, and the way you can graciously handle situations, that really determines where a person is as well, I suppose. Now, where would you like to take your work? I mean, have you thought about publishing a book, or is there anything on the horizon?
Yes, I've got a whole list of things. I've been doing some workshops. One psychologist that has been a big influence. He's actually the president of the Society of Clinical Hypnosis in Vancouver, and I do work with him. I do plan on writing, actually. One of the things that's more on my list in the near future is preparing hypnosis. I will have hypnosis CDs that I will eventually sell. So that for the public, and I would like to publish some of those, and I would like to write. Right now, I've been so busy with my practice and with the radio show that I did have that I'm a bit in transition right now. So as that dust is settled, I'm now moving forward and looking forward to venturing more into things that I'm interested in personally.
And how can people get in contact with yourself as well?
Oh, they can contact me either through my website, which would be, if someone wants to even look at my website, they can certainly go to that. It's www.drlake.ca. That's drlake.ca. The other alternative is they could phone. I do have an office here in Nanaimo, British Columbia, and our phone number here is 250-824-5006.
Okay, well, we just put all that information on screen now. So, Dr. Paula Lake, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for asking me to be here. It was really great to share.
Well, Dr. Paula Lake, thank you so much for joining us today. Well, we've come to an end on today's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.
The More Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.